Hello everyone and welcome to Outriders Worldslayer. In today's video I'm going to share with you a Pyromancer hybrid build using the Reforged Set and focusing on both high skill and weapon damage. We will focus on more Anomaly power, but using a few mods, a few tweaks, the Pax Tree and the Ascension tree, we will have a lot of weapon damage and our highest damaging resource will be the weapon and volcanic rounds. Before we start, in case you wonder why focus on both Anomaly power and firepower when we can focus on one or the other, the simple reason is because you will have the most balanced build, dealing a lot of single target DPS using volcanic rounds and weapon damage. By extension, also having high Anomaly power means that your skills, your burn and status effects will hit a lot. So your burns aren't useless, your skills aren't useless, Feed the Flames hits like a truck, Thermal Bomb hits like a truck, and you have decent AoE and single target DPS without investing, let's say, in both. In case later we invest in both for single target and AoE DPS, this has the potential to be one of the most interesting and consistent builds for both single target and AoE DPS that I have ever seen. So without any further delay, let's have a look at the skills. Because we're using the Reforged Set, we have to use Feed the Flames and Thermal Bomb. This works perfectly for us because Feed the Flames helped us for the part with the weapon damage, and Thermal Bomb helps us with AoE and debuffing the enemies. Volcanic rounds is essential, otherwise we have to focus on armor pierce that we could do something like I have made some tests, however, volcanic rounds work much better compared to just focusing on armor pierce and having any other skill. This is the easiest combination we can use, so let's have a closer look at the armor and mods we're using. We're using the head, the chest and the legs of the Reforged Set because all of them have Anomaly power, skill life leech and cooldown reduction. We need to maximize our Anomaly power in order to, by extent, maximize our firepower, and the hands and the boots from the Reforged Set only have max health. For the boots and the hands, we're using epic pieces, ideally with Anomaly power, close range damage and status power. I was a little unlucky with my drops, however I'm using something that they're not ideal, but these are the best pieces I have found so far. So let's have a look at each individual armor pierce and what mods I'm using. For the head I left double fan, I have replaced Big Boom. This will help a lot for AoE damage and Thermal Bomb. Without this, your AoE will take a huge hit. If you don't want to focus on AoE, you can ignore that, but in my opinion it's one of the best mods in case you run solo. Bloodlust is not the best mod, but it's the best in the slot I found for my headpiece. I would like to replace this with something else. I will tell you in the section for the alternate armor mods later. For the chest, I have left branded, added bullet kindling, and also have bullet absorption, which is a must, which replenishes 40% ammo in your magazine for every enemy affected by the skill. This way you will never run out of volcanic rounds, and that's our goal. For the legs, I left it as it is, although you see I replaced this because initially I had Flame Grasper. I have tried without using double Thermal Bomb, and I found it harder for solo. 2 Thermal Bombs are much better with the setup we're using. It's bad when you face the boss, you don't have to go for double Thermal Bomb because branded no longer stacks with itself, that's why it's a little bad. But for solo, when you need to deal with a lot of adds, Fire Frenzy is a must. Cauterizing Flame, this seems okay, but I may change it or make some more testing with or without this. For now, I don't know how I feel about this. It's okay, I think, for 5 seconds to get 50% firepower, but I don't see it so much in my DPS with or without it, so I will look into it later. For the hands, they're not the ideal. I have Anomaly power, close range damage, I need status power because we need a lot of status power to increase our burn and some ash we inflict. Damage absorber is a must, otherwise you will be very squishy and you will die easier, so I do recommend to have one survivability mode, and damage absorber is my highest recommendation. Dum bullets to increase your assault weapon damage by 12%. Aura Force is something that came with the gloves. I want to replace this with something better, but it's better than nothing. For the boots, we have Anomaly power, cooldown reduction, skill life leads. These two have to be status power, close range damage, something like that. Unfortunately, the boots are not ideal because they have also Unstoppable Force, which is not the ideal mod I'm looking for. 50% over resistance piercing, which currently is 25%. that increases our anomaly power. It's very low, and I don't know if it's worth it. I would probably replace this with something else, and white grip, but yeah, I was very unlucky with my boots, and this is what I have for now with anomaly power, skill life leech, and white grip. I wanted to test it, but I wasn't very impressed, and I'm probably going to replace this. So let's move to the weapons, which is the bread and butter for the whole build. You need to use a proper weapon in order to inflict a lot of damage. I have tested the tactical assault rifles as best potential option, however it's not, unfortunately, because of how our Pax Tree works. They're not the best for now, unless I find something else. The best weapon you can find, and the easiest one to find the weapon mods you need, is the final penance. We need Mage's Rage and Anomaly Enchantment. With these two mods you will increase your both skill damage and firepower damage by a lot. Anomaly Enchantment is mandatory, Mage's Rage synergizes very well with it, and Final Penance comes by default with these two mods. It also has critical damage that we need, skill life leech that is pretty good, and long range damage that is decent, better than nothing. So Final Penance is a very good weapon to use as a main weapon or boss killing weapon in case you find it, and especially if you find a very decent Tier 3 Apocalypse mod such as Fortress or something to increase a little bit your single target DPS would be ideal, but you can also use Final Penance by itself. That being said, I have tested other double guns, assault rifles, LMGs. I came to the conclusion that a stabilizing variant LMG is probably the best potential weapon you can use against Edge. It has a lot of clip size, very good critical damage and very decent damage, and it's very good. In specific, the Emerald Chaos is ideal. It has critical damage, status power. Long range damage is not ideal because we need to focus either long or close range, and I do prefer close range instead of long range with a Pyromancer. But we have two major attributes. Status power is very important. Now, it comes with a very decent tier 3 mod for AoE that also inflicts toxic. It has 3 seconds cooldown. It's one of my favorite options, or you can use this or something similar. Like the Grim Arrow, for example, is also a stabilizing variant. It has Singularity, which is a very good AoE mod. Unless you have now, the Apocalypse mod must be Anomaly Enchantment or Mage's Rage, and you can use it. It also has critical damage, that we definitely need the critical damage, close range damage, skill life leech, so it's a very decent option. Now for the boss killer weapon. I have tested once again tactical variant, assault rifle, the standard variant, which is spoiler, standard variant performs a little better with this type of build because we fire faster and we connect longer, and because of the Pax Tree, this works better for this specific setup. That's why I like it. Now, because of the Pax Tree, the submachine gun, the standard variant, is probably the best weapon to use. It has the highest RPM, very good critical multiplier, and clip size. It only has a very low range. You have to go closer to the enemy, the boss, and the arbiter. However, the damage it deals is insane. You need something once again with critical damage, close range damage, and status power preferably, but if you have these two, you will focus more on single target DPS, Mage's Rage, Anomaly Enchantment, and something else. You don't have to go with Flesh Shredder or something similar. If you get lucky and you find, I don't know, an epic piece that has Mage's Rage and Anomaly Enchantment, I will recommend to you later what other alternate mods you're using. The standard SMG works better because of the Pax Tree and how our talents work. So let's have a look at the talents, how they work, and why this works very well. We're focusing on the Ashbreaker, but we're starting to go to the Tapestry. Now you will see some things. We miss Ashes to Ashes. For the simple reason we will not inflict Ash as often because we're not using Ash Blast. Feed the Flames will hit 4 or 3 targets, 4 maximum, and you won't take as much advantage from Ashes to Ashes. That's why I do prefer to use with Fire and Rifle to have 30% extra weapon damage all the time and against all enemies, instead of having just Ashes to Ashes to inflict vulnerable to the boss or a couple of elites or the enemies we hit. Now we have to go for Inferno Bullets to maximize and have over a million firepower when we are 66 average item level out of 75, and this will give a lot of extra damage. In the process we get 30% extra anomaly power thanks to the tree, and 45% extra anomaly power every time we use Feed the Flames. We don't focus on Trial of the Ashes because Once again, we don't inflict Ash to enemies, but we need the best cooldowns. And Burn Situation to increase our weapon damage by 45%. This way we will focus more on the weapon damage aspect rather than skill damage. That it's not necessary, the skills hit a lot. Thanks to the Reforged Set, everything hits double damage, so you don't have to go even further to maximize the damage from your skills. Now, the Pax Tree focuses on the Gunblazer, and we go for Ash and Regalia. I do recommend to go with this. Once again, we don't inflict Ash to many enemies. This will probably make you kind of unkillable. As long as you keep killing enemies, you will get an extra 21% mitigation, which is cool. We have already default a 68% mitigation damage from physical damage, 10% resistance. This will help you a lot. And we go for Carbon Ammo and Bullet Frenzy. This is why the standard variant SMG is a very good choice. It fires very fast and it stacks the weapon damage very fast. So even if you see 3 million, 4 million, 7 million, compared let's say to the tactical AR that can hit for 5, 6, 7 million per burst shot, this is actually much more damage, because I have tested the Arbiter and you can kill it much faster with a standard SMG. I'm not sure if there is a limit of how much weapon damage you can get, however, because the standard variant SMG fires faster, it will just stack it faster and you'll get the maximum potential you can get with Bullet Frenzy. That's why I like it. Now, for the Ascension Priority, it's pretty straightforward. We need Anomaly damage, Anomaly power, weapon damage, critical damage, and then we focus on secondary attributes such as status power or damage against elites, resistance spears, close range damage, and then a little bit of survivability for weapon life leech, then focus a little bit on long range damage as well. And after that you cannot get cooldown reduction because we have already, I think, 95%, 93%. Only with these three pieces you will have the cap. We have even more because we have the boots, so you won't get any benefit from the cooldown reduction here, just ignore it. You don't actually need any magazine size, you have the 3 times the magazine size for now. And critical chance, I want to try this if it's good or not. However, I do intend to go for long range damage. We have more than enough skill life leech. We have around 30%, which is very good. Then I will go probably a little more on armor, resistance, as we don't have a lot of resistance, armor, health, something like that. So for the alternate armor modes, we're going to focus a little more on single target DPS. We have more than enough for AoE, and I made a little balance to sacrifice a little bit of single target DPS because I've tried this certain modes, tier 3 and tier 1, that are ideal for single target DPS, but I had to make some compromises to balance both things. For example, Dead Cloak is one of my favorite options. This translates in 16% weapon damage. As long as both of your skills are on cooldown, not all your volcanic rounds will always be active, and that's why we're using this for 16% extra weapon damage, which is probably one of my favorite and very good mod I do want to use. Sharp Eye is probably the best firepower mod out there now, because critical shots will increase your firepower by a lot, more than 300,000 in our current level. And yeah, compared to everything else, this provides the best firepower. I do want to use it instead of Bloodlust, for example, to increase further my firepower and by extend my single target DPS. And I do prefer this mod and Kingslayer instead of Arms and Anomaly, which will convert a portion of this to firepower. But for now, even close to 1 million Anomaly power is more than enough, because thanks to the Reforged Set, we have 100% extra damage for Feed the Flames and Thermal Bomb, and it's more than enough for AoE. We need to focus a little bit more on single target DPS now. Danger Close, I want to try it a little bit, because 6% Anomaly power for its enemy in close range should be good. It's 25% maximum, and yes, 25% Anomaly power is better than a standard Anomaly power increase, especially if you have, let's say, 1 million. That's a lot, or 2 million later, 2.5, something like that. This can be better. However, I need to test this before using it, but these are probably the mods I'm mostly going to use. Fire Trap is better if you want to focus for AoE or kill the enemies that explode. For single target, this is pretty bad. And Voracious Flame is probably also a little bad, because most of the enemies will either die or go just very low health, and you won't have the opportunity to use Flame Grasp against those enemies. Against a boss, most of your damage will come from volcanic rounds and not from the Feed the Flames. That's why I don't think this is very good. and Ashen Bloom is also, I think it's underwhelming by itself, but I do want to test thermal reaction, because every time we use thermal bomb, our next successful shot will deal some damage. Killing an enemy will give us 30% anomaly power for 3 seconds. I don't know how good this is. I have to test this, but it seems a little mediocre because only 3 seconds and not so high damage. Surprisingly, for tier 2 mods we have some options that are good and some options we can avoid now. Personal space, 12% extra unconditional damage for close range. This is something I want to use, and there is a combination with Trample the Weak and Radiation, I think it's called, yeah, Radiation Flames, that we will inflict weakness with volcanic rounds, and we can deal 12% extra damage to enemies against afflicted by weakness. Now, in case you want to use this, I do recommend to have both your weapon, gloves and boots with status power. This way you will have around 140-150% status power for the weakness to last on those enemies and to get advantage of Trample the Weak. Otherwise, it's not worth it. I need to make some tests before using this. Now, Reforging Bullets is usually one of the best mods for the Pyromancer, but for us, we don't actually need it. We have so much ammo, and Feed the Flames will give us all the ammo we need back, so this is not necessary. Also, Ashen Boost, we don't inflict Ash as often, so we don't use it. Ash Cleaner got nerfed and has a 3 seconds cooldown, which is very disappointing, that's why I don't like it. Crit Stack, I have to test it because it increases both Anomaly power and Firepower, and Anomaly power will be converted to Firepower by extent, so this can be actually very good tier 2 mod to use for this type of build. And probably one of the best tier 1 mods now is Lava Shots. It will increase your bonus firepower by 25%. Now this means that when you have a million, it's 250,000 firepower unconditionally, as long as you have volcanic rounds active, and the more firepower you get, the more this mod will scale. So this actually gets even better when you go to 2 million or 3 million, something like that later. With better gear, this can be actually very good to increase your damage surprisingly very well. For the other mods, we don't need to focus on skill damage once again. For Anomaly Hunger, Final Breath, I don't want to spam Feed the Flames because I want to spam my weapon and use Feed the Flames to get some ammo back, some health back, proc my weapon mods and my talents. Otherwise, nothing is just caught my eye for everything else. And for the Thermal Bomb, True Blast is actually not necessary. We deal a lot of damage thanks to Reforged. This is just the overkill. In case you just want to have the overkill AoE damage, use True Blast. Otherwise, I don't recommend it. For the weapon mods, actually we don't have any alternatives we can use. We need Anomaly Enchantment, Mage's Rage is mandatory, and then we need to find, let's say, the perfect third mod. For this to happen, it's very rare, especially if you want to choose a tier 3 mod. And for this to happen can only happen, for example, in the final penance. In case you have Mage's Range, Anomaly Enchantment, and then you can use something else. Or if you find an epic piece that has Anomaly Enchantment, Mage's Rage as an Apocalypse mod, and then you can choose another mod to use. For single target DPS, Fortress or Dark Sacrifice are the best. Dark Sacrifice has the edge because it gives higher damage bonus, just flat damage bonus. However, I would recommend Fortress because it will both increase your survivability and DPS for single target, and I do like it. Or you can use other mods. I don't know how good Relativity Theorem is because I don't once again want to focus on my skills, especially if I'm using the tier 3 mod that increases 16% for its healing cooldown. This doesn't synergize very well. I would focus more on something like to increase our single target and AoE damage for Violent Rapture, Flesh Shredder that scales with firepower, although for now, for example, even if you get 2 million firepower, this will deal 1 million in comparison. The other tier 3 mods already deal 2, 3 or 4 million in comparison to the best mods. If they fixed Omen, it could be good because it will inflict bleed and increase the damage received by 10% for 3 seconds and will be up very good a very long time. So this could be very decent. Or you can use Killing Spree, but in my opinion the best options in case you have to choose after you have Mage's Rage and Anomaly Enchantment are Fortress and Dark Sacrifice. Now for tier 2 mods, in case you find multiple choices and you have to choose, Improved vulnerability bullets could be very good because especially if you have enough status power, this will remain a lot against single target DPS are ideal, but for AoE, Bone Shrapnel is the best because for critical shots every 3 seconds will inflict a lot of damage for 5 meter radius and inflict bleed, so yes, go for this. And that's it for the alternate weapon mods. So the rotation is pretty straightforward, you have to keep volcanic rounds up 24/7. Thanks to Feed the Flames and Bullet Absorption, use Thermal Bomb, Feed the Flames and Thermal Bomb. This way the first Thermal Bomb won't hit as hard, however, Feed the Flames and the second Thermal Bomb and so on will hit for 100% extra damage, and if you use it correctly, you can proc Thermal Bombs with Feed the Flames. They have decent range, you can hit worst case scenario 3 targets, best case scenario 4 targets, and just cause a chain of explosion. And because Thermal Bomb will have the double fun, can inflict in 2 enemies, you can inflict in 4 enemies, the explosion is very good with a big boom, and the damage for AoE is decent. Go for criticals to proc Mage's Rage as fast as you can, and when your skills are on cooldown, you will deal a lot of damage using Volcanic Rounds and kill the enemies. Now, for single target DPS, you can use Thermal Bomb, Feed the Flames, keep shooting. Don't use the second Thermal Bomb if you don't want to waste any time, unless you have that clock that you need to have both skills in cooldown to increase your damage by 16% maximum, because Branded unfortunately doesn't stack with itself and we don't get any benefit. And that's it, it's pretty straightforward. It's basically a firepower build with anomaly power to increase our skill damage so they won't be useless. So both our firepower and skill damage is decent. It's a very good build. If I had to take advantages, it's a fun build, very decent, very competitive. For single target AoE, if I had to find a disadvantage compared to other Pyromancer builds, it's lower for expeditions or Tarya Gratar, but it's done on its own. It's not the fastest, but it's one of the funnest and very consistent builds you can use to farm Tarya Gratar or expeditions. And that was it for today's video. I really hope this will help you to build your own variation for the Reforged hybrid build to focus on both anomaly power and firepower damage for both weapons and skills. Very fun, very good to play, a fan favorite that it's finally possible thanks to the Pax and Ascension tree. Before that, the build was okay, but with these changes and the extra mods, this actually has the potential to be one of the most fun builds out there that deal both good weapon and skill damage. So thank you very much for taking the time to watch the video. Extra thank you in case you stick around until the end. Feel free to like and subscribe for more upcoming videos for Outriders Worldslayer and other video games. And as always, I wish you all a wonderful day.